Welcome to Genuine Life Recovery. We're here to help you and your loved ones overcome addictions and other addiction-related mental health challenges. In this show, we dive into the physical, emotional, psychological, and spiritual aspects of addiction, mental health, recovery, family dynamics, codependency, and more. You can listen on your favorite app or at jodystevens.org. Genuine Life Recovery is made possible by great friends like Joshua's Heart in memory of Joshua Brent Moore, bringing hope, love, and awareness to those afflicted by addiction, online at joshsheart.org, and Jody Stevens Productions for commercial voiceover, narration, production, MC, and public speaking, online at jodystevens.org. Hey friends, welcome back. It's Genuine Life Recovery. I'm Jody Stevens, talking about addiction, recovery, mental health challenges related to recovery, and of course, redemption and overcoming, which is what we are going to be chatting about today. And I'm talking with Tanya Jurecki. Tanya's with Radiant Redemption. Tanya's a wife, mother, blogger, coach, and a fellow sobriety sister. So welcome, Tanya. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on today.
Yeah. So, Tanya, whereabouts in the world, in the country are you?
So I am close to Cleveland, Ohio. That's the easiest place to point me. So right outside of Cleveland, right on the lake.
Oh, wow. I bet it's nice there right now.
It's gorgeous. So it's cooling off, and I think we're finally going to start getting some fall weather. It's been really hot and humid, so it's been a nice change the past couple days.
Yeah, so we are in what month are we in? We're just at the beginning of September, as we're recording this. So, Tanya, you how long have you been sober?
Almost 3 years. It's a hair shy of 3 years.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank
You are a
you.
miracle. How does it feel?
Sometimes it still feels like a dream, like I'm going to wake up and all of this is not like true. But it's so, like, it's so awesome. Each day, even though it's hard at times, like it's just such a gift to actually be able to be present to my life now.
Mm-hmm. So when you were in active use, were you still married? Did you have kids and things like that?
Yeah. So
Okay.
I think my drinking probably actually spiraled out of control the worst after I had started having kids. Like, I think something for me snapped at that point, and I didn't know how to cope, and alcohol was the only thing at that point that I knew to use to kind of get out of my head, to numb, to avoid. And I think that actually probably accelerated my drinking.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it might have been kind of a godsend when you think about it, because now you've got these kids and you're like, wow, I've got to straighten out for them. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think some days when you have the hard days, it's nice to know that there are other things outside of just me that I need to be accountable to and responsible for, to help kind of keep me motivated.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, this is great. You're a miracle. So glad that you're sober. I've been sober, I forget, 18 years, and then my husband's got 20, so we're
That's amazing. Oh,
we're
it's
on
amazing.
that. Yeah, we're on that long journey with you, but I love getting the chance to talk to younger people, because it's different today. It's a little different for young people today. You've got all the digital, the social media, for all that front that we have to put forward and stuff, and we didn't have that when I was growing up, and that must be hard. I think that must add another layer to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I actually, when I was first getting sober, went off social media completely, because for me it was too hard to be on there. I mean, everything was and I got sober in the height of the pandemic. So that was when it was wine o'clock all the time. And I mean, everyone was justifying drinking constantly because you're at home all day. You're locked up. So it was why not, and you can order alcohol through delivered to your home. So I do think it can be a blessing and a curse depending on your habits around it. Even now, stepping back out into it, it just figuring out what is okay for me to look at and what maybe I need to stay away from. Because even though I might have almost 3 years, I'm always one choice away from going right back out. And I think just guarding that really carefully.
Yeah, we get that daily reprieve,
Exactly.
depending on our spiritual condition. Well, take us kind of back to the beginning. I usually like to do a little chit chat before we dive into the deep, dark story. It's always fun to come on a show and just go, well, you know. But when did the drinking start for you? Yeah.
Yeah, so for me, it wasn't until like senior year of high school. So I was 17 when I had my first drink. My first like actual getting drunk was shortly thereafter. It was the second time because the first time I drank, I was like, "This is disgusting. Like, I don't get the point." The second time I got drunk, and I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh," and it felt like coming home. And I think so. The easiest way for me to explain it is always feeling like I was like there was something inherently wrong with me. Like I was not lovable how I was. I was not okay how I was. And so I had spent my entire childhood and adolescence like going after academic success. I can't talk. And chasing like people and thinking if I looked a certain way, like all the things, right, to try to find some form of validation to know it was okay to take up my space. And drinking was the one time that I felt fine without any external validation. And that was kind of like, I spent the rest of my life chasing that initial like feeling. But yeah, I mean, so it started there and it pretty quickly progressed for me because I was hanging out with people who were drinking. So like I was a blackout drinker for the better part of like 18 to early 20s. I had no gauge for my limit. So I was the one who would be, down in shots till I passed out. And it just, I met the man that would end up becoming my husband when I was 19. He was deployed for about a year and a half. And during that time, like I was just out drinking, partying with my friends, doing what I thought every normal, like 19, 20-year-old was doing. And it wasn't until he came back home and I started realizing like, not everyone drinks the way that I do. Like I'm still passing out every time I drink. And my friends like aren't doing that. So I changed my friends and then I slowly started to start drinking more in isolation. Like I would drink by myself. And what I would normally do is if I was out with people, I would only have a drink or two. And then I might finish up at home or I might drink a little bit before I went out to kind of like help lubricate because I did not know how to be social without alcohol. Getting married, like for me, so there was still the initial like alcohol kind of helping me feel okay. My own skin went away real quick. And then I was right back to seeking validation from people again, which was a lot of lying, a lot of manipulation. So like with my husband, he thought, I was telling everyone I was going to nursing school. I was going to become a nurse. I was not. It was all lies. And I was leading him to believe, we're getting money we're not getting. Like I started digging, like creating this false person that I thought would be acceptable and living out of that delusion. So we started having kids. And I think, like I said, I think something kind of snapped in my brain. And I feel like a lot of the childhood stuff that I had tried to run away from was begging to be addressed because I never thought I was going to be a mom. And so having kids, all of a sudden, it was like, no. I wasn't supposed to have kids. I can't be a mom. Like, no. And it just, rather than like do anything about it, I went to what I knew, which was continue to lie, continue to drink, continue to hide, because I didn't know how to open my mouth. And I was convinced that if I started to say, hey, I'm not okay, like I didn't think it would be received well. I was so afraid of what might happen if I started to say, I'm lying. And so I just dug it in deeper and continued to put up basically walls between me and the world. Like my marriage was dying quietly because my husband couldn't be with someone who wasn't there. And if I'm living in lies, I'm running off. Because like I said, I told him I was a nurse. So I said that I had to travel for my work. And I would go thinking that I was going to be able to somehow solve the problem I was digging us into by running away for a weekend. And normally it just ended up being an excuse to go hide off and drink because I was trying not to drink at home around my kids that much. Because that made me feel better about my drinking. Those games we play, like, well, if I only drink on this day or only this much. And eventually it led to, like, kind of the tipping point was in, I think it was March of 2020. So right as the pandemic striking, like, I lied, said I had COVID. And continue to spiral it up. And I think what I was trying to do was back myself into a corner. Like I hated myself at that point. Like I was waking up every day wishing I was good, like praying for God to take me out. Like, please just kill me. I don't want to be here anymore.
Yeah.
I ended up escalating from just having COVID to saying I had cancer. So I made my whole family, like my husband, my kids, my family of origin, his family, like everyone. I told everyone I was dying. Rode that out for a while.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
It got really dark, really dark. And that went on until November when my husband finally was like, you know, stuff's not making sense to me. And I don't think I believe what you're telling me anymore. And at that point, I wish I could say that I just kind of like threw myself, you know, gracefully into this process, but it was kind of a slugfest. Like I did not want to be honest about what, like who I had been, who I had chosen to be. So we were able to very slowly start to work through just the massive amount of lies that I had, and him starting to learn what his life really was, who I really was. I ended up getting into an intensive outpatient in December. So I did like a month dry, got into IOP, and at the time it was all virtual because it's still COVID. And so of course they're really big on AA. So I started going into AA. But for me, like, so one of the things that I think I wish I would have done differently in hindsight, I needed to come forward and tell everyone that I didn't have cancer because, of course, people think I'm dying. No one knows what's going on. And so it was important to be forthright about this situation.
Yeah.
But like, there's a reason you're not supposed to do your 9th step until you've done 1 through 8. So like, I wasn't in a very good place to be going out trying to like do this. And it just, I think, fueled my shame. And so I get into AA and all of a sudden I got attention from some guys and I decided to engage in 2 affairs. And while I didn't go back out drinking, like I still, obviously that is not okay. I was still running and I was still hiding and I was starting to manipulate again. Fortunately, like it got to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm leaving, you know, I'm leaving my husband and I'm done. Like, I'm just done. My husband was able to talk to me. We decided to work it out. I mean, it's only been through the grace of God, like that we are in a place where we're stable, but we're still married. Our family's intact. Like I was telling you, we have a puppy now. Like it's just, life's turned around completely. But in coming back home, I was able to start seeing my counselor she's like a counselor, mentor, coach, like grandma. Like she's just this wonderful figure. She's got like 43 years in sobriety.
Oh wow, that's great.
She runs a meeting that is my like home group, and that was kind of like the tipping off point, like meeting someone who had been into some of the dark places I had gone to and was on the other side, like to kind of help just show me it was possible. Because I think that's what I was missing before, is like, is it possible to live outside of, like, I only felt okay in AA, like in the rooms. And when I would go out into everyday life, it's like, I still feel less than, I still feel all this shame. And it's just been in doing my work with her, and starting to like work through some of my shame and some of the lies that were like foundational to who I thought I was, to be able to start to turn it around and start to embrace like actually living a life again, getting to be a present mom and a spouse, and like show people that I'm not just like a liar and an alcoholic. Because I think too, like, I didn't think I was an alcoholic, because I always thought an alcoholic was like someone who, like, you know, sleeps under a bridge and is drinking out of a brown paper bag, and that was not me. And it's like, no, the problem was what I was
not
using
you
alcohol
yet.
for. Exactly. Oh yeah, that's where I was going to end up. I mean, gosh, yes.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. That's just the part of your story, but so far that's really amazing, you know. And I love what they say in recovery is that anyone has the ability to recover, even if they have grave mental disorders, if they have the capacity to be honest. And when we break down honesty, right, I think it goes into the depth of who we are. Like, I always think addiction is coming back to ourselves, the true self that God created us to be. It's just hard for us addicts because we don't know what that is, right? Because you probably started creating the false thing. The I would say that the alcohol probably wasn't your first addiction. Your first addiction was creating something, right?
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
I did that as a little kid. I was a dreamer. I was going to be in all this movie, and then I was the girl in that movie, and those sorts of things, right?
Yes. Well, yeah, I mean, so I grew up, both of my parents grew up in abusive alcoholic homes, and while neither one of them are
Yeah.
addicts or abusive themselves, like we just didn't have emotional sobriety. And so for me,
Yeah.
like middle child and more prone to like acting out of my emotions, always felt like I was too much. And like, so I would go into
Yeah.
this little fantasy land in my head where I was enough and I was accepted just how I was. And so, yeah, I think that started very early on. And I think alcoholism just helped, like alcohol helped make those two worlds mesh a little easier.
Yeah. Well, and when you're told to not feel a certain way, stop feeling that way, or in your case, maybe it was just we just can't talk about that. Our feelings are very intricate to who we are, right? And so when you stop feeling that way, you're basically kind of being told your feelings are wrong, so therefore you're wrong now, you're bad now, you're shameful. Stuff those things, don't feel them, then you kind of have to create someone else, right?
Exactly. Because it's not like the feelings just go away because you tell them to, and you can pretend they're not there, but they're always
Right.
there. They're always there.
Yeah. So were your parents active drinkers, or was it their parents, or kind of what was sort of the family cycle like at that early age?
So they didn't really drink very often. Like, and my dad actually quit drinking when I was like, gosh, maybe like early adolescence. My mom drinks occasionally. She like, but there was never like problematic drinking behavior. Like was in looking back, I'm like, it
Right.
wasn't modeled. And because yeah, like of my siblings, I'm the only one that has that has an issue. So the drinking from them wasn't that bad. It was more, I think, they like coming into their story and they're coming out of an abusive alcoholic situation and trying to do
Yeah.
better for their family, but also still lacking and still needing a lot of healing on their own. And so I think it's in those places like you can't take people where you haven't been. So if I haven't healed myself emotionally, I don't know how to embrace someone else's emotions. And I'm sure for them sometimes it probably felt like you don't know how good you have it, because for them growing
Right.
up, like being able to mouth off to their parents was, no, we don't do that. And whereas for me, I was
Yeah.
like, I'm challenging you on everything. Like that's a little bit of my spirit as a child. Like I was the one who was willing to say the things that no one else in my house would say, because we kind of had some no talk rule situations. Like we didn't really discuss a whole lot of things. And for
Yep.
me, if something didn't make sense, I would argue it. Like, well, why? What is this going on? And so I think, yeah, just there were a lot of things I think that I probably embodied from my parents that were a sign of healing, but they didn't know what to do with because they were still, again, working out some of their own trauma and their own like past.
Right. I mean, no one ever talked to them about their feelings, and it's like the generational cycle of codependency is what I call it. Codependents and alcoholics were the same. It's the same
Oh, yeah.
thing. Like my mother was, or, her father was an abusive alcoholic, and then she was just like super codependent, like just always outwardly having to make this the perfect life for us because by God, we weren't going to be like her dad and blah, blah, blah. And then we all ended up being alcoholics, the kids. It's like, well, how does, and she's like, how did this, everything I tried to avoid, I created, and but that's just the cycle. I mean, back then you didn't talk. And then the grandparents, there was war trauma and there was all this stuff where everybody just shut down. Families stick together, don't talk, do as I say, not as I do. Right? This is probably kind of personal, but you probably got your period and didn't even know what was going on. Probably no one talked to you about sex, right? This is so common in that addictive family dynamic where you've got everything provided for you and oh, we love you, but emotionally you're just left, right? I mean, was that kind of what it felt like?
Yeah. And Yeah, I feel like my sister did her best to kind of like step in and explain things to me, like,
Right.
hey, this is your period, here's how you shave your legs, like just these basic like things with being a woman that you're
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm not supposed to be fuzzy everywhere, like this is what, okay, you know. And yes,
Yeah.
it's hard
Yeah.
because you look back and you're like, yes, all of my needs were provided for in terms of like a house and food and,
Exactly.
but yes, emotionally there was a lot that was just not there. And I do think that you feel the impact, like we all feel that, and in how we express it obviously can be different. But for me, I started creating like a fantasy world in my head where it was safe and where I could be as I was and it was okay.
Wow. So what has it been like just getting honest for you? Is that still a daily thing? Does it come more naturally to you now? Have you kind of dug into some of the of roots of the manipulation and deceit and things like that?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously every day I have to decide, you know, how I'm going to handle myself because we only ever get the 24 that we're in. But it gets easier.
Yeah.
And one of the things, and this was actually, my counselor said this and I took it on for myself because I just love it, is that if there's ever anything I don't want to say, it has to be the first thing that I say. Because I think if I give myself any space in my head, like the worst place I can be is alone in my head. And so
Yeah.
I think the more I'm able to just like how I'm living and what I'm telling people, the more those are in line, the easier it gets. And it's like there are no massive things to hide anymore, which makes it a lot easier.
Yeah.
It can still be hard sometimes because, I mean, no one wants to sit there and admit where they messed up or, you know, like
Yeah.
it's frustrating when I still treat people poorly and I'm like, gosh, why am I still doing that? Like, why did I like get so snippy with you? I don't want to do that. But it's so much easier now than it used to be. Like at first, living in honesty felt so scary because it felt like I was living with my neck like on the chopping block constantly, and just feeling very vulnerable and very exposed. But it's such a better way of living. And like what I didn't realize before is that like in living out of a false self, like I never got to experience any real emotion because without the harder emotions, there are no good emotions. So there's no real wins and there's no like real sadness. You're just kind of in this constant state of like low level misery. Like it just kind of sucks all the time. And so now it's like I actually get to experience like happiness and joy and peace. And yes, there can be challenging emotions in there too, but I get the full spectrum of it, which isn't possible when I'm lying and when I'm living in my head.
Yeah. It's authenticity. You know, you get to experience
Yes.
that real authenticity. And I think too, when we're younger like that and we're using and drinking, we're just going and we're moving and we don't even really know what we're trying to cover up. You know, looking back, it there was so much digging. It was like a sock drawer of just emotions, and I didn't even know what they were. I had road rage and screaming and anger fits, and I mean, I didn't know what, you know, and it took me 10 years. 10 years to figure out, wow, I'm really codependent. I mean, I was in my mid to late 30s before I figured all this crap out. You know, so for people listening, it just takes time. You know,
Yeah.
it gets easier. It's you're peeling back the layers of the onion and figuring out, you know, right, like what am I feeling? What is this feeling? And the more we work through it, then the easier it gets, right?
Exactly. Well, and just to be like one of the biggest things is being kind, like get curious and get kind. Because sometimes for me, it's like I'm getting
Yeah.
a really like extreme reaction here. And that's not normal, you know? And like just starting to then get a little curious about why this might be happening versus like
Yep.
freaking out or trying to pretend it's not there, which were normally what I would do is just, oh, no, I'm fine. Everything's fine and avoid it. And yeah, I think, gosh, like what I'm learning now and what I was learning when I first started, like actually trying to attack through this, I think you do. You just learn more and you evolve and you're able to go deeper and deeper. And it's less scary, I think, the further you go into it. And so I like that you said that it took you like 10 years because I think it's an ongoing process. Like we're complex human beings, and we're
Yeah.
really good at like covering up what we don't want to admit to ourselves. So I think, yeah, just being patient with the timeline. Like I love progress, not perfection. We just take our time with things.
It's lifelong. I mean, it's a lifelong journey of just, the layers of the onion peel back, but it is great. I mean, people think, oh, sobriety, how boring, I'm going to have to give up everything. And it's like, oh, no, no, life's so sweet when you're sober and you get to see the sunrise without a hangover.
Yes.
It's wonderful.
It is. I thought it, like, because I felt the same way. I'm like, how do you have fun? What do you do? And now it's like, it's
Yeah.
freedom. It's so freeing, but I would
Yeah.
have never thought that. It's one of those like conundrums where until you experience it, it's hard to imagine it being like anything other than a punishment or like lacking, but it's freedom. It really is.
Was there something in the recovery that just clicked for you when you were in the AA or maybe with your counselor or kind of the turning point where you were just done? You're like, oh, this makes sense. I get it. Was there a light bulb moment or was it just all kind of a progression for you?
So I think in IOP and in AA, like realizing drinking was no longer an option, that light bulb clicked there. But I think in realizing that I didn't have to live with all of my shame happened with my counselor. It was something about being able to tell her my story and be seen and loved exactly as I was there. That was like, oh, it can be different. It was like something clicked where it's like, it can be different and I want it to be different now. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I think it was the moment of just like complete surrender, because I think it had been like surrendering in ways. And then finally it was like, I'm done. I give it all up. Like, I'm done with all of it. I want something different. Like, I looked at her and I'm like, basically I was like, I want what you have. And I'm ready to do whatever I need to do to get it.
And what's so beautiful about that is you decided you wanted what she had once she accepted and listened to you unconditionally. And that's the power of therapy, the fifth step, all of this, because all the false fronts we're creating is so that people will love and accept us. And so that's why that step is so powerful for those of you that haven't been in recovery. You kind of do this personal inventory if you're going through the 12 steps. You do the same thing if you're doing self-reflection, if you're doing any kind of recovery. And then what you do is you confess it all. You kind of just tell your story to someone who's going to love you and not judge you and completely accept you. And that is such it's like a mirroring experience, and it's such a powerful experience to be loved and accepted unconditionally, that, I think that is one of the turning points for a lot of people, like, and even in yourself in recovery, like you said, it's like, wow, she's not judging me,
Yes. I mean, I think it's so healing, one, to just get accepted, but then two, also, like, to hear other stories and to realize, like, okay, I'm not alone. Because I think that's the other piece of it is, that terminal uniqueness where no one's done what I've done. And if you've heard anything about me and who I really am, you never want to talk with me. And it was like telling my story. And she's like, okay, now what? Like, here's my story.
Yeah.
You got nothing to be ashamed of. Like, it's fine. And
that is what's so funny. You're like, oh, no one's woke up in their own vomit or peed in the bed or... I'm just going to say it, because when you're a blackout drunk, you lose all function, and that's where some of the shame comes. You think no one's ever done that. I went to my first AA meeting drunk, I'm like, because I think anybody would notice, I mean, really, and so, I mean, you're right. It's just, I mean, my brother died of alcoholism. So, I've seen it all. At my age. So anybody that's new, that's listening, it's all, there's nothing new under the sun, and you're not terminally unique. Yes, you are lovable and you are unique, and God created you and you're wonderful. But at the same time, right, there's nothing you can do that's going to make people love you less, especially in recovery. Right, you go into those rooms and it's like, come on in. We've done it all. We've seen it all.
Exactly. And I'm like, geez, with my story, I'm like, I can hold space for anything you got. Like, I've done pretty much everything you can do. So like, it's fine. I gotcha.
Yeah. So did you try to quit a lot on your own?
Oh yeah, I did
Yeah.
like where I'd only, okay, I'm only going to drink on the weekends. I'm going to only
Yes.
drink wine, not, liquor or just beer or just, two a night. Like I did all of this stuff where like, okay, I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not drinking again, only that night to, then be like finding a way to get some more to drink. Like I went through all of the nonsense, all of it.
I love the ad infinitum. We tried drinking only wine, drinking only beer, drinking, sanitariums. I had that quote somewhere, like to use because it's just so funny. But what it's basically saying is everyone in recovery goes through this. And I don't care if you're addicted to alcohol, drugs, porn, food, whatever it is, we go through the I don't want to ask for help, so I'm going to try and figure this out on my own. For me, it was me and God. It was like, okay, God, just me and you. I don't need anybody else. And he's like, no, you got to go to those meetings and you got to do all that stuff. And so, if you're listening, we need other people. You're not going to be able to do it by yourself. Generally, it just doesn't work that way. We have to have that community.
Yeah. Well, I think the accountability, because again, like in my own head, I can
Yeah.
justify anything I want. So, like I can
Yeah.
take something, spin it, and run. It's like,
Yeah.
so I think the most dangerous thing I can do is to be alone in my own head. Like I need support. I need other people to be like, that doesn't make sense. Let's talk about this a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and then we learn stuff though through, I don't know if you had relapses, but we learn through that. We learn what our triggers are. We learn, people feel so ashamed when they relapse. And sometimes there's people that don't want to help them, but relapse is I actually didn't really relapse, but I know most people relapse over and over and over again, and it is a learning process. It's part of the game. And the more we can begin to learn through that process, what triggered the relapse, what we need to change, in our program. I mean, I think that's an important thing for people to understand because we don't want to shame people for relapsing. The important thing is they get up and try again, right?
Exactly. So relapse wasn't when I was trying to do it on my own. Yeah. I mean, but it was hard to say that I was never really sober at that point.
Yeah.
But to me, I think it takes a whole lot of strength to relapse and then come back in. Because I don't know that I could do that. Like for me, I'm like, if I relapse, it would be really hard to get myself back in the room. So when I look at people who come back in and reintroduce after going back out, like I am just inspired by their strength because that's commitment. Like to me, if you fall down and you're willing to get back up and be honest about it and come seek out support, like that's huge because again,
Yeah.
learn, grow, adjust, and you're going to get it. Like it's only too late when you give up. Like until that point,
Yeah.
there's always possibility to do this. Like it's still within reach.
And we need that community and the help to develop new ways of living and new ways of coping, because like
Yes.
for you and for me back when I was drinking, it was the only way I knew how to cope. And so what people don't quite understand about addiction, a lot of times they're like, why would they keep lying? Why would they keep hurting their families? Why would they like sell their kids? And the reality is the coping mechanism is their survival. And then of course we got the dopamine and the reward circuits and all the brain things that are happening. But the reality is it'd be like, okay, Tanya, your only way of survival and coping is drinking, and I'm just going to take that away. I mean, we just take that away from someone. If they don't have any means, any community, and any different coping skills and any way of replacing it, they're doomed, right? I mean, they're doomed.
Exactly.
They don't have any other way, and that's why the if there's trauma, right, the therapy is so important, or at least getting in the rooms and learning from other people. How do I cope when this happens? How do I ask for a raise? How do I like we come into recovery and we may know all this intellectual stuff, but emotionally a lot of times we're just like not even knowing how, we're emotionally like 13, and we're 20, 30, 40, 50, right? And so you got to
Exactly.
relearn stuff. Did you
Yeah.
find that,
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I felt like I was a 5-year-old. I mean, just like explosive emotionally, like no emotional
Yeah.
regulation. And so, yes, I
Mm,
mean, and I think being in community was helpful because I wasn't the only one and we could all kind of laugh at each
yeah.
other. And it's like, yeah, I tried to meditate, but it was awful. And I don't feel like, and just like laugh at each other through like our missteps in trying to like find alternative ways to kind of sit and deal with our emotions versus instinctively trying to like grab for something to get ourselves out of it.
Yeah.
Because I almost like,
Yeah.
I think the easiest way to do it is like, okay, so for instance, with your phones, with scrolling social media, that's what a lot of us do when we don't want to, like, I need to disconnect, I need to numb. So I'm going to grab my phone and scroll. And
Oh,
it's like, I don't mean to
yeah.
ignore my kids, but I just want to scroll my phone right now. Meanwhile, my child's begging for my attention. It's the
Hmm.
same kind of thing. It might not be as extreme as like what we do in active addiction, but it's like everyone can identify with that space of like, binge watching Netflix, scrolling social
Ugh.
media as a way to not deal with whatever you don't want to deal with. And it's like the more we try to run away from it, the more we get consumed and controlled by it. And that's
Yeah.
how addiction takes hold. Because I know if I
Hmm.
go here, it makes me feel better for a minute, even if it's laughing at something ridiculous or getting like angry about something I see online that I have no control over. It gets me away from
Yeah.
whatever it is I'm trying to run away from. And like with TV, I mean, my gosh, problems are solved within a
Oh,
half an
Lord.
hour and it's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, recovery is so much like the buzzword now is mindfulness, but that, we can call it something different so people like it better, but it's true. I mean, that's what you have to do is name and claim the emotion. You don't have to judge it. We all have horrible emotions. We're all driving along thinking, "Oh, I want to kill that guy, who did road rage." And it's okay. It's like our thoughts, they're just our thoughts. Our emotions are just our emotions. They come, they go. They don't have to define us. But really, just it's so important to just check in with yourself because when we're younger, when we're in active addiction, we're not stopping to think. We just grab the bottle, grab the tea. We grab it. I mean, and a lot of times you don't even know. You're not even, and so the first part of recovery is just the gradual slow down, right? Okay, just stop, just for a minute.
Yeah.
And then slowly we can begin to do that. We can begin to be more mindful. Like when I had massive anger and road rage, the time between the anger and the action of, flipping someone off, slamming on the brakes, getting into all that mess with like dudes that were huge. I mean, like I was crazy. What was I doing? It felt so automatic. But slowly I started to see, okay, wait, there's a split second where I have a choice, right? It's just with our addiction or whatever it is. And then the second grew into maybe 2 seconds. But it takes time. It does take time because those automatic things, they are automatic destructive behaviors and coping mechanisms, but slowly, right, they'll become less automatic once we start to recognize and be more mindful of it. You know.
Exactly. Yeah. My sponsor
Yeah.
would always tell me like first thought wrong, like first thought wrong. Just and my initial impulse is almost always wrong. And so if I just
Right.
toss out that first idea, eventually I'll get to a better one.
Oh, I like that. I like that. So talk to me about your program, Radiant Redemption. It sounds like redemption is important to you. What does that mean to you, redemption?
So to me, like it's more, I love to look at recovery as, and like just redemption. Not only are we healing from like our addiction, but we're getting to be restored and fully like living a life with purpose. So we go from basically
Yeah.
death to life is what that means to me. Cause like
Yeah.
I was basically like dead at that point in time and now getting to be fully alive, fully present, living a life of purpose and meaning. Like that's what that means. It's like that full restoration.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Finding our deeper purpose in life. That's one of the huge things is finding your purpose. That's one of the huge parts of just living. Um, I don't know if it's necessarily that we always have to find our purpose, but we do find our own meaning in life. You know,
Yes.
what is that for you? Is it helping others? Is it rescuing puppies? You know, do you even know yet? You're pretty young, so
Yeah, I mean, I know right now, helping others, like if getting out here and
that's good.
sharing my story to be able to help show one other
Hmm.
woman that there's a way out, like that is huge for me. And yes, we did just get
Yeah.
a puppy, and I do feel like that's hugely rewarding too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would I would just say also the ability to change the story for my children, and to be able to kind of break the
Yeah.
curse with my family and what I'm doing, my own work, and what that means for my kids and my children's children, and like just the legacy, getting to rewrite it is another thing that really is so rewarding and huge for me right now.
I love to, and I really appreciate you coming on and sharing the deceitfulness, because so for me, I was emotionally, I didn't know who I was, but I was always like way too honest, almost honest to a fault. But the flip side of that was I got taken advantage of a lot. Like I couldn't see the that in other people a lot of times until it was too late. And so you kind of have that unique ability. Like I work with addicts as well, and I have my MS and addiction counseling, and I was at an opiate treatment center. But even then, like some of the lines people would spin, I mean, and it took me a while. Like I was like, holy crap, they are completely full of it. Like you can probably see that. You probably have that gift where, you know, because there's kind of two different, you know, some people are super deceitful in recovery, and then other people are just like so broken and like they're almost too trusting, you know. But it sounds like you have like a unique gift where you're going to be able to really spot the BS, you know, which is great.
Yeah, I mean, and I do think sometimes it's like, yeah, I know that's not true, and it's fine.
Right.
Like one of
Yeah.
the boundaries I have to keep is that I can't want it more than you do. Because if I want it more than you do, then I'm crossing lines here, and that's not healthy. So if you want to lie, like
Yeah.
that's your choice, and I will love you, but I'm not going to participate in it.
Yeah. Yeah. But it is a common theme because we're just scared and we're running, and so I just appreciate you sharing that. A lot of people will come on and they will share their addiction recovery, but not everyone comes on and says this is, you know, the behavior I was doing. My husband was more like that. You know, he was recovered narciss. I mean, you know, there was narcissism in the family, and so he would just learn to just spin it, you know. And if that's what you learned and that's what you do, it's you have to relearn that. And I always say you don't know what's wrong until you know what's right. And once you get with people that are authentic and trying to help you, you go, oh, so this is what normal is. So you have to be around those healthy people, or you have no idea what normal looks like if all you've seen is dysfunction or drinking or you know things like that. And then once you're around the normal people reflected on you, you're like, oh, right?
Yeah. Well, it's like again, you don't know your normal's abnormal until you get around someone else. And I
Yeah,
know, like, for me,
yeah,
it was learning really early on that it's those small things that you learn in terms of, okay, so we go someplace and we're not okay, but we're okay when we go out in public. Anyone asks and it's like, oh, we're great, everything's fine. And
yeah.
it's those small lies that like can just kind of, for me, started to grow. Where it's like, okay, well, not only am I just fine, but I'm
Yeah.
gonna just like run with that. And so, like, for me, I just want to help normalize that there's a whole spectrum. And so, like, if someone can
Yeah.
identify with what I went through and go, like, okay, well, if she was able to turn around, maybe there's hope for me too, and it can
Right.
be different.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So tell me about your program, Radiant Redemption.
Yeah, so I work specifically with women. It's tailored for women. I run a 12-week coaching group, and we
Uh-huh.
are gonna tackle specifically areas around like shame and like lies
Yeah.
about who we are. Start to get a little more in those, because while I think the steps are wonderful and they help, I think just additional work around shame is huge. I know for me, like
Yeah.
it took a lot of like specific work in there to even understand where it was stemming from. Because even as people were
Yeah.
receiving me well in recovery, like I couldn't accept myself. And so it was still like a
Yeah.
tripping point. So it's just designed to help uncover some of the lies you believe, some of the shame you might still be carrying, and learn how to live differently, like learn how to like the truth about who you are, and to start to like let go of the shackles of shame. I love to call it like shackles because I feel like you're bound. As long as you're living in shame, like you're bound to it, and it just drags you down. And so learning to live in freedom.
Yeah, it's so true. And then even just understanding what shame feels like. You know, I went through that years ago. I was like, is this what shame feels like? I didn't even know because I was stuffing it for so long, and then I started to feel it, you know, and then, but the truth is we're good and bad. We do bad things, right? Guilt is that I feel bad for what I did, but shame is that I'm bad. Shame says you're bad, and that's what we want to get rid of because that's not true, right? We're not bad. We weren't created bad, but yeah, we do bad stuff. Right? Just like your kids. Like you would never not love your child because they painted the wall blue. Like you'd be mad. Your behavior's bad, but you're not bad. That we'd believe like we're bad. And that's when the destruction comes, you know?
Exactly. And it's like we're a mix of both. Like we can do really amazing things and we can do really horrendous things. And that's just part of the human experience, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Well, Tanya, what advice would you give for people listening that are still struggling in their addiction?
I think first and foremost, like reach out. Like I think you already said this, we can't do this alone. And being willing to take that first step and just admitting that you need help is huge. Yeah. And I think that's the jumping point. Like one is admitting you have a problem if you're ready. Like if you're ready and you want it to be different, because that's the thing. Like you can't get sober for someone else. You have to decide you're done. And if you are at that point, then like there are so many hotlines that you can call and just or even just a friend or a counselor. Just like I need help. Yeah. And taking that first step, because sometimes that's the hardest one to take is just to say like I need help.
Yeah. Amen. That's so true. Well, Tanya, thanks for hanging out. How can people get in touch with you? Can they connect with you or email you, go to your website if they're listening and they want to reach out to you?
Yes, so my website is radiantredemption.com, and then I am also on Instagram and TikTok at radiant_redemption, and those are the easiest ways to get at me. But my website has some resources and more about my coaching if they're interested.
Awesome. You're on TikTok. I love that. We need better advice on TikTok. We need people giving good advice. Like, everyone's like, this new trend of eating, dishwasher pods or putting weird stuff in your laundry. I mean, some of these people, I'm like, what are you doing?
I know. That's where I'm like, there can be like healthy sober life. Let's look at some healthy sober life. We're not eating weird things. We're not doing let's just
I know. And all the news it feels like comes from a TikToker and a TikToker. I'm like, do you guys do real journalism anymore? Or you just go to TikTok?
I think so.
I do. I'm just like, oh. Anyway, not to diss TikTok. There's great. Like Tanya's on TikTok, so there you go.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, thank you for your honesty, Tanya, and I just appreciate you being here and sharing and just being authentic and real. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, friends, for listening to Genuine Life Recovery, playing on your favorite app or on my website at jodystevens.org. It's JODIESTEVENS, jodystevens.org. There you can check out my podcast, blog, recovery coaching info, speaking, and more. Check it out.